One of our partners submitted a question yesterday, and it is a great teachable moment. So he mentions the fact that I often talk about putting positions in your portfolio that are expected to have higher growth into a Roth account. So he wanted to know why. Well, let me see if I can illustrate this with an example. It's all about being tax efficient and it's based on my belief that taxes are going to be higher in the future than they are today. So let's say for a moment that you have $100,000 in a 60-40 portfolio. That means 60% in stocks, 40% in bonds. So let's assume that the long-term average for stocks is around 10%, and it's around 5% for bonds. So now you have a weighted average for returns, the long-term average returns for your 60-40 portfolio of about 8%. So let's also assume that 50% of your portfolio is in a Roth account, the Roth account growing tax-free. So 100% of the growth in your Roth account is going to come to you. 50% of your portfolio is in an IRA, where you are growing not only your part at 8%, but you're growing the government's part at 8%. So you're being such a great asset for the government. You're growing your future tax liability. So here's scenario one. Let's say that you don't strategically place your investments by type of account. Let's just say that you own exactly the same portfolio in your IRA as you own in your Roth. And let's say that the average growth rate is 8%. Well, after your Roth account with half of your $100,000 is growing at 8%, and your IRA is growing at 8% too, because you have identical portfolios. So after 20 years at 8%, your $100,000 becomes $466,000. Your Roth IRA is $233,000, half of that, and your traditional IRA is $233,000. Your Roth account has a $0 liability to you and to your heirs because it's all tax-free growth. Your IRA has, and let's make some more assumptions here. Let's assume that you're like the average retiree in the current tax brackets, and your $233,000 as you withdraw it, maybe over the next 20 years, and this also assumes no growth. This is very simplified, makes a lot of assumptions here. But if the tax structure is like it is today, and you get 50% of the income that comes out of your IRA, out at 12% and the other part at 22%, and you get all of your income from the Roth account out at 0%, then you end up having a tax liability of about $40,000. Okay? 0 from your Roth, but $40,000 in taxes from your IRA. Now let's look at scenario 2, where you're careful about where you allocate the different pieces of your portfolio. Let's assume that you put all of your stocks that are growing at 10%, right? Stocks average 10 in your Roth account, and then you put all of your bonds plus the rest of your 60-40 allocation into your IRA. After 20 years, you end up with the same thing, an average growth rate of 8%, but it's all about what you keep. So where you've placed the higher growing assets in your Roth account, you end up with $336,000 and only $130,000 in your traditional IRA, because you have mostly the slower growing bonds with an average growth rate of 5%. So the total's the same. Average 8%, you end up with $466,000 in both scenarios. But you end up keeping $18,000 less in the first strategy, where you don't tax locate, because you have a higher balance in your IRA that's all subject to taxes. So if taxes are higher, like I believe that they will be in the future, and the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act, Trump's tax cuts that were enacted in 2018 are not extended at the end of 2026, it's going to become even worse than what I just described. So believe taxes are going to be higher in the future than what they are today, and it makes sense to take a long-term approach, even about your taxes, for your investment strategy.